Good day, everybody, and welcome to the quantity theory of money. Last time we learned why a poor country doesn't become rich when they print a lot of money. All right. We also learned that the price level or the value of the money, however when I say it, right, the price level or the value of money is determined by the supply and demand of money. All right, so what happens when the money supply increases? Okay, well, so there's an injection of money in the economy, and now so there's excess uh, money in the economy at this prevailing price level, right? So there's more money in the economy while the price level is still at A. But the number of resources or the number of goods and services in the economy remain the same. So there's more money in the economy with the same goods in the economy. So people start bidding up the price of goods and services. And that's how we end up to point B. That's how an increase in the money supply increases the price level. All right, so you understand the relationship between the amount of money in the economy and the price level, but there's other variables that are involved in this, and these guys wanted to find out and discover what is the other variables and what are the relationships between them. What they came up with is called the quantity theory of money. Quantity theory of money. Okay, remember that, all right? That's what we're talking about. Because you might get test questions that are okay. According to the quantity theory of money, you got to remember what the quantity theory of money is. All right, so anyways, so where M is money supply, P is price level, and Y, we know what Y is from examining GDP, right? Y equals C plus I plus G plus NX. We all remember what that is. Y is the same. Y is real output. But we also have one other factor, and that is velocity, the velocity of the money that is in circulation. Remember that economic variables can be divided into two different groups. And in fact, it was the classical dichotomy here, which basically said, hey, we need to separate these two kinds of variables. Okay, so anyway, so nominal variables are basically variables measured in monetary units. Real variables are variables measured in physical units, right? So anyways, the income of a wheat farmer is basically, it's a nominal variable, right? It's measured in monetary units. But the quantity of wheat, that's a real variable. Okay, so monetary neutrality is just this proposition that changes in the money supply do not affect real variables. They affect nominal variables, yes, but not real variables, all right? So changes in the money supply right here affect nominal variables measured in monetary units, but it doesn't mean that, we're going to be producing a lot more wheat just because we print a lot of money, okay? So basically, as prices go up, right? Prices go up and the money supply grows and they're printing more money, however you want to say it. The real variables like real GDP, jobs and employment, investment, they remain the same in the long run. So how many times per year is the typical dollar used to pay for a newly produced good or newly produced service? That is called the velocity of money, and it is another factor that influences inflation, or I can say the price level, right? So if $1 changes hands more and more and more and more quickly from one person to the next person to the next, they're buying stuff, buying. What do you think? Is that going to be inflationary or is that going to be deflationary? You're right. It's going to be inflationary. The higher the velocity of money, the more inflationary it becomes, okay? So the quantity equation relates the quantity of money, the velocity of money, and the dollar value of the economy's output in goods and services. And of course, you can mix and match and switch it all around if you wanted to calculate velocity or if you wanted to calculate the price level, if you wanted to calculate the money supply. All right, so we're given two questions here. Question number 1, what is the price level? Question number 2, what is nominal GDP? As you guys know, right, I assume you guys know that nominal, right, nominal GDP equals P times Y. It's the price level times real GDP, right? So anyway, well, I guess I have to find what P is before I can find nominal GDP. Then isn't that the truth, right? So anyway, so we'll take our formula, M times V equals P times Y. I have to mix up the formula here. So basically, in order to mix up the formula here, I have to isolate P. I'm looking for what P is. So I have to divide by Y on both sides. And I ended up with, like, P equals, right, M times V over Y. Okay, and I'll move P to the other side here when I do my calculation. Okay, so P equals, M is going to be 2,000, right, times velocity, which is 5, and I'm going to divide that by the real GDP, which is going to be 5,000, and not 50,000, teacher, just 5,000, and P, if you do the calculations, is going to equal 2. All right, so that's what the price level is. Now let's find out what the real GDP is. Well, that's easy, right? Our nominal nominal GDP. I have to find out what nominal GDP is. So in that case, I multiply the price level, which is 2, times real GDP, which is 5,000, and we're going to get a nominal GDP of $10,000. So okay, so that's an example. How would you find the price level, and how would you determine what the nominal GDP is? Nominal GDP is price times Y. All right, so it's helpful to look at these variables on a graph. And what do we see? Well, we see the money supply increase. We see nominal GDP on the rise as well. Remember, nominal GDP is made up of P times Y. And then we also see we have velocity here on the very bottom, that straight line at the bottom. And okay, so there we go. There's all our variables right there, basically. We know that with an increase in the money supply, that really affects P, right? Due to monetary neutrality, we know that the increase in money supply affects P, but it does not affect those real variables like real GDP, Y. Anyways, so it's quite interesting here, isn't it? What do we notice about velocity down here at the bottom? Well, one thing is it looks pretty stable, doesn't it? It looks pretty consistent over time, especially on the graph on the left. When we look at the graph on the right, I suppose a little bit of a close-up of that line, we can see that it does swing a little bit. There are some changes, but really you have to look up very, very closely in order to see the changes in velocity in the economy. Now, yeah, so anyway, so these days, I suppose you can see, on the graph on the right, you can kind of notice that there is kind of a trend downwards, right, with velocity. Money is not changing hands as quickly as much as it used to. People are instead keeping it in the bank and things like that. They're holding it more often as a store of value. Right? And so that is deflationary by its very nature, right? Because, well, I mean, just look at the equation. If we have a declining velocity, that means we're going to have a declining nominal GDP. Anyways, and nominal price level, right? We're going to have a decline in the price level, right? And I think that's like basically, this sort of shows the current state of affairs, because I believe that if the Bank of Canada just stepped out and just got their mitts out of the economy, what we would see, because of this declining velocity here, we would see some deflation, right? We might, and I'm not saying like a crash or anything, just like deflation might be the natural state of affairs if the if the Bank of Canada stepped out. We might see -2, -3% inflation. I think because what we're seeing is a consistent decline in the in the velocity of money. And why is that? Well, it is indicative of an economy that is experiencing slow growth, right? Honestly, right? I mean, if the economy is booming, then the money is changing hands a lot faster. But what are we sitting at here? 1.4? So that means that a dollar bill changes hands 1.4 times a year? That's pretty slow. There must be a lot of money held up in savings, right? And yeah, so anyways, so yeah, it was 2.5 last time. Just imagine if the velocity went up to 2.5. That would have a significant difference on the price level, right? And inflation. It's almost as if the Bank of Canada, they realize that, the natural state of affairs is deflation because of this lower and lower and lower velocity. So we have to make up for it by printing money, because what they want to have is price stability. That is the stated goal of the Bank of Canada. So actually, they're looking for 2% inflation. And when I say price stability, so they don't want big swings in inflation. They don't want 2% one month and then 8% the next month and then minus 4% the next month. They want it to be stable. They want price stability, but they want to have a little bit of inflation, right? Their stated goal is to have a 2% inflation rate. But so that's what I mean by price stability. They want it to be consistent. They don't want any big fluctuations in the inflation rate because it causes problems. Stay tuned for the next video, guys. All right, so just a quick review here, right? So because V is stable, right, velocity is stable, when the central bank changes M, it causes proportionate changes in the nominal value of output. In particular, it changes P, right? Since Y is determined by factors of production, right? Y here is determined by factors of production, those things that we learned in chapter 7, those things like technology and human capital and physical capital and labor and having natural resources and all those kind of things, right? Since Y is determined by factors of production, the change in M only impacts P, and that's due to monetary neutrality. Okay, sounding like a broken record here. I know you guys got it, but anyways, 3, when the Bank of Canada increases M rapidly, there can be a high rate of inflation. Let's look at some examples of that on the next slide. We can see that happening in times gone past. Look at the connection between the price level and the money supply of countries, especially that were having or enduring hyperinflations. We can see there's a strong correlation between the price level and the money supply. Inflation can also be considered a tax. How's that possible? Well, governments often print a lot of money because they want to finance their own expenditures, and sometimes this causes inflation. We see that happening in Venezuela and Zimbabwe, for example. So the government's taking action, printing a lot of money, causing inflation, and what happens to your money, the money that you've saved in your bank account? The value of that money decreases. So in this way, the government expenditures causing inflation can destroy the value of the money in your bank account, and in that way, it can be considered a tax. Now for the Fisher effect. You guys remember monetary neutrality, don't you? Monetary neutrality was the idea that an increase in the rate of money growth raises the rate of inflation, yes, but it does not affect any real variable. That includes the real interest rate. The real interest rate is basically determined by the supply and demand of loanable funds. You remember this from chapter 8, don't you? So anyways, right. So as you can see, this is the real interest rate, and it depends on how many people, all the savers, and and all those people, and how much they're demanding that loanable funds in order to consume goods or to invest, right? Anyways, the point is inflation affects the nominal interest rate, not the real interest rate. So, hey, take a look at this mortgage advertisement here in the bottom right. This mortgage advertisement is really low interest rate here, 2.25% for a mortgage. So what does the bank think when they're offering a mortgage that cheap? That is the nominal interest rate. And basically they have to think about what is the real interest rate, which is again the equilibrium of the supply and demand of loanable funds. They know what it is for them. They know how much supply of loanable funds they have, and they know how much mortgages are in demand. So they know what the price is, the price of the money, which is the real interest rate. But they have to predict what's the inflation rate going to be. Now, 2.25%, that might be a one-year variable mortgage. I'm not really sure. 5-year fixed mortgages go for about 3% right now. What does the bank think when they're offering an interest rate, a nominal interest rate? What do they think over the next 5 years? What do they think the inflation rate is going to be over the next 5 years? They're going to think it's going to be pretty low, right? Maybe, well, actually, I told you guys that the goal of the Bank of Canada is to basically have about a 2% inflation rate. All right, so what is the real interest rate, do you think? If they're offering a fixed rate for 3, and the inflation rate, if they're expecting it to be about 2, which what they have been in the past, that means the real interest rate must be very, very low indeed. It's kind of amazing when you think about it. The real interest rate would have to come all the way out here, right? So 4, 3, yeah, it would be about here, right? So this supply curve would come down like this. Isn't that amazing? There certainly is a lot of money in the economy or in the financial system that is available to borrow, right? There's money on the sidewalk, but no one's really picking it up, right? No one is really investing a lot of money now. It is a signal of the times that we live in, isn't it? Anyway, so yeah, the Fisher effect is basically the nominal interest rate that adjusts to the expected inflation, what they think the inflation rate is going to be, right? And so anyways, basically what we see is a one-to-one adjustment, right, in the nominal interest rate and the expected inflation rate. Whatever they think the expected inflation rate is going to be, they have to make a one-for-one adjustment to the nominal rate. And all the nominal rate is basically real interest rate plus the inflation rate. Anyways, hope that was helpful. So here we can see the correlation, right, between the nominal interest rate throughout our history here, way back as 1968, and the rate of inflation. Right now, keep in mind, banks, they always set their nominal interest rates based on the expected rate of inflation. Right? And you know what? They're not always right. Sometimes they are wrong, right? And banks will lose money in certain cases because they get the estimate of the rate of inflation in the future, they can get it wrong. So let's say the government of a country increases the growth rate of the money supply from 5% to 50% a year. Okay, is that hyperinflation? No, it's not. Remember, hyperinflation is 50% per month. Anyways, so the government of a country increases the growth rate of the money supply from 5% to 50% per year. What happens to prices? Well, okay, let's see here. Prices are going to increase. We are going to be experiencing inflation. The price level is going to increase. What happens to nominal interest rates? There's that word nominal. Real interest rates wouldn't affect anything, but nominal interest rates, if you are printing money and there's inflation, whenever there's inflation, nominal interest rates will have to increase as well to accommodate that inflation. Otherwise, the lender would be losing money. Why might the government be doing this? They might be doing it to finance their expenditures.